Okay, welcome to the 2026 election hustings for Deputies of St John, St Lawrence and Trinity, which is tonight coming from Trinity Parish Hall. I'm Gwyn Garfield-Bennett. I'd like to make you aware that this event is being live streamed to vote.je YouTube channel, where viewers can access closed captions. A recording will also be uploaded to both the vote.je website and to YouTube. You can watch that afterwards. Now I'm going to keep this intro brief because I want you guys to get the most out of it as you can. Please, can I ask you all to double check your phones are turned to silent so we're not disturbed. I'm sure you realise that you can vote for 3 of the 4 candidates who are sitting here, who are standing as your deputies. They've agreed to hold a ballot today so that we've agreed on the sitting order and the speaking order. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Kirsten Morell, Hilary Jearn, Peter McClinton and Phil Romerell, who are all independent candidates. So we're going to start with a short speech from each candidate, which will be followed by questions from you. These will be strictly timed in the interests of fairness, and I'm not going to waste any further time. I'm going to kick off with the 3-minute speeches. Kirsten Morell.
Thank you, Gwyn. Good evening. I'm Kirsten Morell, and I'd love to serve you all for another 3 years, or 4 years, in fact, as your deputy. I have served for 2 terms. During that time, I've been a scrutiny chair, I've been an assistant minister, and I've been a minister for economic development. Last election, there were no senators, so deputies had to stand up and lead the government. I did that, and I was one of only 2 deputies who served for all 4 terms in the same post. I believe I managed to do that because I work hard, I work well with others, and I have a record of delivery, both in scrutiny and in government. In the last 4 years, I've delivered, and you may be surprised by this, but I've delivered more than a new ferry, which was, after all, a Council of Ministers decision. It was designed to protect the island from a highly indebted company, and you can learn more about all of that saga on my website. I've also, in that time, led teams that have delivered support for agriculture, which has turned the industry around and protects our rural parishes. A new simplified alcohol licensing law, which can help attract more investment into hospitality. I've delivered a scheme to stimulate investment in local businesses because we know we have a poor record of reinvestment in businesses and we needed to change that. I've also delivered new air connections to the UK and Europe. Far stronger relations with France. In fact, I've effectively led on our French relations for the last 4 years. I've also ensured that we delivered a refurbished opera house and renovations at Elizabeth Castle. I will always support and champion our heritage and our native language, Jerrier, because I believe in a strong, unique island identity and that our future is stronger if it is built on our past. That identity, at the heart of that identity lies our parishes, and this term I want to focus on our 3 parishes again. By working with our communities, I believe we can make Jersey an island of opportunity for all islanders at every stage of our lives. I have seen and see regularly the loneliness and the isolation that comes from ill health and the death of a spouse or partner, and I want to work with our parishes to create the networks to combat this loneliness. I want to see the Island Plan, which will be debated in the next 4 years, deliver more communities like Maison Cabot or Maison Le Vacant. By giving older people more options, we can free up family homes without needing to build them. Whether I'm in government or scrutiny, I will continue to help push for the diversification of Jersey's economy because it's vital that we create interesting career paths to help encourage our children to stay here. I will continue to push for the simplification of the rules and regulations that government has built up over the years. If you elect me, I will continue to work hard, whatever my role in the States of Jersey. For the 4 years ahead, I want to put you at the heart of my work.
And
in doing so, make sure Jersey is an island of opportunity for us all. Thank you.
There's some space in the hall if you'd like to come into the hall. And there's also a seat here at the front for anybody who'd like to sit down. Somebody at the back would like to sit down here at the front? Or come along the sides of the hall so you can all fit in and see. There's one seat there if you'd like to take that seat. Okay, everybody settled again. Right, I'd like to introduce now to Hilary Jearn.
Thank you, and good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight. After more than 20 years working internationally, I chose to come home. I grew up in St John's, but Trinity is very much part of my story. My children went to Trinity School. Our family is part of the Battle of Flowers Association, helping with the float and fundraising through the year. And my eldest son is an active member of the youth club. I am watching a whole generation of Trinity young people grow up. That matters. Being your deputy starts here, on the ground, in the parish. It is why I am seeking re-election. Serving as your deputy has been a genuine privilege. Over the last 4 years, I've worked with hundreds of residents on the issues that affect daily life, planning applications, road safety on our rural lanes, healthcare, and social security challenges. When you contacted me, I listened and I acted. In the Assembly, I chaired the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, holding government to account on areas such as housing, tenancy law, planning policy, infrastructure works and marine protection. As Assistant Minister, I chaired the Energy Policy Roundtable and helped deliver climate grants for islanders and businesses. As Vice Chair of the Machinery of Government panel, I pushed for greater transparency and accountability in how government operates. And I chair JAF, Jersey's youth homeless charity, because you cannot make good decisions from a comfortable bubble. You need to see what is actually happening with the most vulnerable in our community. My approach is simple: be accessible, be accountable, and deliver. But the work is not finished. Jersey faces real and pressing challenges, and islanders are feeling them. So my focus for the next term is clear: a resilient economy. We need responsible public finances, a clear energy strategy, support for small businesses, and we need stronger skills and apprenticeship pathways so young people can build their futures here rather than feel they have to leave. A sustainable Jersey. We need to deliver the next island plan with genuinely affordable housing, to bring empty homes back into use, to protect our countryside, coastline and biodiversity, and to support local food production and our farming community. And a fairer Jersey. We need sustainable healthcare financing so services stay accessible for everyone, real support for carers and families, including affordable childcare, and stronger protections for young people online. I cannot deliver all of this alone, but I will champion every one of these priorities consistently and always with islanders' long-term interests at heart, working across government, parishes, businesses, charities, because the best solutions for this island come from the whole island working together. What I'm asking for tonight is simple: the chance to continue the work with the same commitment and the same determination to ask the difficult questions and push for the right answers. You deserve a deputy who shows up, knows these parishes and does the detailed work. I believe I'm that deputy and I'd be honoured to have your vote. Thank you.
Peter McClinton.
Thank you, Gwen. So, good evening. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Some of you may know me from being on the radio, but honestly, that's just one small part of who I am, and certainly not the reason why I'm standing here. I'm standing because I care deeply about Jersey and because I believe we need more practical, human approach to politics again. Trinity's been a very important part of my family's life over the years. We've been very fortunate to live in 3 different parts of our beautiful parish: down at Roselle, in the boathouse, the one with the mural on the side, glorious, and Mont d'Olivet, which you might know over the way there is Anna Wicker's old place, and where we live now on Rue de Cannon, which is just around the corner, which is glorious. So Trinity genuinely feels like home for us. I'm a Jersey-born boy to Jersey-born parents. I went through the island school system at Lemoy and Lekenoe schools. I trained as an electrician with Jersey Electricity. I worked in broadcasting, in entertainment, helped run a visitor accommodation business with my wife Gina, who's just there. Spent years helping people through therapy and coaching. Those experiences have given me a broad understanding of island life and the pressures that people are facing. And if there's one thing I hear again and again, it's frustration. Frustration with housing costs, frustration with healthcare delays, frustration with systems that feel complicated, slow, and disconnected from real life. And I think most islanders are far less interested in political point scoring than politicians sometimes imagine. People want practical solutions. They want government to function well, communicate clearly, and make life easier rather than harder. And I believe that we as an island can do better. We should think longer term about housing, prevention and healthcare, supporting local business, improving digital systems, and creating opportunities that allow younger islands to build a future here instead of feeling forced away. And we should be willing to learn from other successful small jurisdictions around the world, rather than assuming the island has to reinvent the wheel every time. I have previously served in the States Assembly, starting 12 years ago, unbelievably, so I understand both the opportunities and frustrations within government. If elected, I'll try to bring calmness, common sense and accessibility, less ideology, less shouting, more listening, and more focus on real-world outcomes. Because ultimately it's not about politicians, it's about the future of an island we all love and the responsibility to leave it stronger, fairer, and more livable for the generations that follow us. Thank you.
Phil Romerell.
Thank you. So, I'm Phil Romerell. Thank you very much for coming out in such massive numbers. That's what I expected from Trinity, because I know how engaged you are in your parish and your island. So I'm a Jerseyman. I've lived here most of my life. I was brought up in St John and brought my whole own family up in St John. And what I recognise from our parishes that make this district is there's a lot of things in common. We both love our parishes, okay? We both have a really strong sense of community. We look after one another when we need a bit of help, but that is all based on personal responsibility. And that is what has formed my values throughout my life and my career. So my career, well, I was a community pharmacist. I had a community pharmacy business that operated across Jersey and Guernsey, and at some point delivered 30% of the prescriptions delivered to islanders on both jurisdictions. The last 8-10 years, I've been working largely in the charity sector. I'm the chairman of Family Nursing and Home Care, and also I've set up various community good organisations and social enterprises during that time. Now, what these experiences have taught me is that you bring people together, you create great teams, and you can get an awful lot done. Sadly, I don't see that consistently in the way our government behaves and acts. It feels like there are people pulling in different directions, working in their own silos, and that just wastes time, wastes our money, and actually leads to us to not trust and believe that the government can really deliver the things we need. So to me, the priority over the next 4 years for the government is to actually deal with that and get our government working properly. There's a couple of other things that really are highlighted. One is that our economy is stagnated. It hasn't been growing as well as we need it to. And in fact, if we can diversify and grow our economy, we will end up putting more money into people's pockets. And that is the best way of dealing with the cost of living crisis in the long term. But on the short term, there's something that's happening. Every Hustings I'm going to now, the hot topic is a low-cost supermarket. Bringing Aldi, Lidl, or a French supermarket to the island has now become the focus of this election. And I will work hard to make sure that happens in the first 4 years. So the last thing I'll say is the role of deputy. To me, the role of deputy is the bridge between you, your community, the parish, and the ministerial government to make sure that your voices, your needs are heard when the big decisions are being taken. And I will commit to do that if you elect me in the election on the 7th of June. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates. And now it's time to open up for questions. Did we have a volunteer to take around the microphone? Thank you very much. Your name?
I'm Jane.
Hi, Jane. Thank you very much. So, Jane is going to pass around a microphone. I would like you to state your name, please, and where you're from, because we will be prioritising those who live in the constituency. So, that's why you're stating your name and area you're living. Please hand the microphone straight back to Jane as soon as you've asked your question. Questions must be brief so we can get through as many as possible. No political speeches from the floor, please. We're leaving that to these guys sitting at the table here. Questions, of course, must not be offensive in any way, and they must be able to be answered by every one of the 4 candidates, so they can't be aimed at one person. There will be no questions allowed from other candidates or existing states members. So I'm going to take one question from each person for now, up to our finishing time of 9 p.m. If we get time, then I'll give the opportunity to take a second question. Candidates will have 90 seconds in which to answer their questions. Again, I'll be strictly timing that. So I'm going to let's get started. And I know there was a question at the back there. Jane, yeah.
Hello, my name is Alexander Charolambus and I'm a parishioner of Trinity. So we young people believe we need more to do in the parish. So what are your thoughts on the possibility of a skate ramp in the youth club outdoor area? And would you personally be happy to work with the youth club and skate parks Jersey to get this project underway?
So thoughts on a skate park and youth club in the area? That will go first to Kirsten Morell.
Thank you, Alexander. And it's absolutely vital in Jersey that we make sure that Jersey is attractive to young people. If that doesn't happen, we will all have problems as we get older and as we require more care, more social care. Ultimately, we won't have enough people working to support us. So it's absolutely vital. And from my perspective, we've delivered a skate park in Le Kenove. It's a fantastic skate facility. There's one at St. John's, which works really well. And if the one in Trinity could help, and it's not a skate park, I believe, it's a ramp. And if there's one in Trinity which can help, then I think we should absolutely try to enable that. Skate parks do come with issues around noise, so somewhere which is a bit further out is useful. And I know in St. John's it's by the recreation centre, and so that there isn't much housing around there, and that helps a great deal. But by working together with the parish, I, as a deputy, would absolutely be very happy to work to try to make sure that we can deliver a skate ramp and other recreational facilities. But we need to work that in a way where neighbours aren't affected and the parish can be happy with the result. But there's no reason why not. And it's vital because young people are our future, and we know we've got a problem with young people leaving this island. So for me, that's a real priority, keeping young people here.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for asking that question and be brave enough to ask those questions. And I know we've actually talked about it before because it's something, while I've been your deputy, that we've talked about. And I think it is really important to think about how we could manage a skate park here, especially because, as you've told me, there is the equipment to start that process. So we just need to find the right space, as Kirsten said, and talk to the community and the neighbours and what that could look like. I also just want to say I think it's really important. The youth club here in Trinity is fantastic. I know I already said it in my speech, but it really is a hub for the community, and it's something that we really need to support. And I think there could be other things that we could do in that community space and for youngsters as well. Maybe, for example, like a cafe to maybe like a youth cafe that the youth could help learn how to support the community, for example, and bring the different fantastic groups that are happening in Trinity together, so we can actually have the youngsters, for example, maybe be able to support the WI or the other groups that are here to help when there are events, and having that more integration. And I know that the youth club, could think about those kind of things as well, and I'd be happy very much to be working with them. So thank you.
Hi, Alexander. I had a look at the equipment before, which is around the back. I hope it's still fit for purpose. It looks like it's been sitting there for quite a while, and somebody will check it over. Absolutely. You certainly have my backing, because you guys deserve to burn off some energy and have some place where you can go to be young, because it flashes past you really quickly. Now, what I've got to say is, having come to the constables' hustings here, both the candidates in the room, and they seem to be very willing to work with their deputies to try and make everybody's life in the parish as good as possible. So whichever 3 candidates out of the 4 of us get through, personally speaking, I'm more than willing to help out. In fact, even if I don't get through, if I can help out, I will in any way, shape or form, because it is so important. Everybody is of equal value in society. From cradle to grave, we all matter. We are all as important as each other, and we have to attend to different stages in people's lives. You guys deserve your area to skate. You guys deserve it. But quite rightly, as Kirsten says, we probably have to be a bit away from residential areas, because I don't expect you can do that very quietly. So we have to look to that. But one way or the other, you have my absolute support on that. And seriously, rattle my cage if you need any help, with or without me getting in. Thank you.
So, Alex, thank you very much for your question and for asking it. I think, as the guys have said here, this is an essential part of what needs to be done for Jersey in the future about young people. My focus with young people is to engage with you and ask what you want in everything. I was involved in a project last year called Iron Longevity, and we made sure that the young voice was actually incorporated in the grassroots thinking of that, so it actually built through the system. So whilst I understand that you've been given a kit, in fact Natalie Meyer, who is important in skate space, was involved in that project, so I'm really quite versed on this. Getting your voice into the design of youth services, what you want from the start, is going to be a vital job for the parish to do, but also for the island, because this isn't just a Trinity issue, this is something that happens across the whole island. So yes, I will definitely support. I think I've already communicated that back to you anyway, and I will be looking, if elected, to make sure this happens.
Okay, next question, please. Please don't be shy, you're here for a reason. Lovely, thank you. Please state your name and where you're from.
Yeah, sorry, Richard Day from St John. My question is, I've just got off the plane from Iceland. Iceland and Norway. Yes, Norway. Sorry, I'm tired. I've got jet lag. How do you feel that we can improve the present system of government, is the question. A system that is clearly driving the island's economy into debt and doom. I asked, have we placed too many eggs in one singular basket? And they don't have the beaches we have. They don't have as much sunshine. What have we got wrong?
So have we got the system of government right in Jersey? Okay. So that will go first, please, to Hilary Jeanne.
Thank you, Richard. And I know we regularly have this discussion when you have come to my regular surgeries. And we've had long debates about have we got it right, and this has actually came up already in our Hustings in St John's, and I think we do need to pause and think, have a look at if it is right, because there are 49 members in the States, but it usually is split into half, where you have some going into government and have making clear decisions. Not only, a lot of them are decisions by orders, for example, that are not brought back necessarily back to the state's assembly. So there are many things and decisions that are happening that we, as the rest of the elected members, don't necessarily know about. It could be a good thing, because those things can happen. It means decisions can happen fast. But it also, causes us to pause for a concern, because more and more of our legislation are putting these kind of orders in that ministers will be making more and more decisions in the future, being less and less coming back to States Assembly. So I think there is a moment where we do have to review. The Clothier report was a long time ago, where we do need to sit and think, is there something better? I think the panel, which is cross-panel between government and the backbenchers, called the Machinery of Government, is the right place to start that discussion. It shouldn't be for the whole of the state's members to look internally on themselves. But we do have a panel that could look at this.
Thank you.
Richard, yes. Been giving this some thought. Now, a lot of people hark back to the old committee system and say it was far better back then, including people who sat on the committees. But it was slow. It took a long time for anything to happen, and time costs money. It costs us all our money. Conversely, the ministerial system, we know who is responsible, or we believe we know who's responsible, who's sitting at the top of the tree. So it was discussed at the previous hustings, something approaching a hybrid system where we have a minister who is in charge, who oversees a committee of backbenchers, of various people from the assembly, who can feed back, along with advisors, expert in that area, not just officers from the departments, might work. Now, the one problem we have is we will end up in the assembly eating up valuable time talking about how government runs again instead of trying to sort out the problems we have. In other words, we'll be turning in on ourselves and Parliament will eat itself yet again. Now, I think there is something to be said for a hybrid system, but what I'm really interested in is what you think about that, because in the end, government is for you. It shouldn't be done to you, and far too often that appears to be the case. So happy to discuss at some point, Richard, if you've got any ideas.
So I think I touched on this in the opening speech, because what I see, and I think most people see, are they're quite disappointed about the way government functions. There is a certain feeling that the change to ministerial government hasn't landed and hasn't done what we hoped it would. But I do agree with what Peace has just said. We don't want to see a bunch of politicians looking at themselves and trying to work out how they're going to work again. So we need to find a different model within the structures we've got, because there are more critical things for us to deal with at the present around the cost of living economy, which must be dealt with first. I am a big fan of the idea that Peter said around a hybrid system, bringing in external expertise. And there is a starter of a model that's just forming in the health department around something called the partnership board, which is bringing experts alongside civil servants into a discussion environment that can help set strategy around health. We can look at that in other departments, and that might be a way to take things forward. I do think, though, as Kirsten's probably experienced this to some degree, I think, in the last few years, support around the ministers. I think sometimes ministers are just isolated and appear to be left hanging. So we may need to have a look at something to support them, particularly if the civil service is not actually acting in the best interest of the minister.
Thank you, Richard. And yes, as with Hillary, I've also discussed this with you in the past. Jersey has a decision-making problem, and I think the biggest example of this is the hospital. You know, that was kicked off by a fellow parishioner in Trinity, Deputy Pryke, and Andrew Green as well, and then it was taken through with John Lafondre's government, and then into Christina Moore's government, and now with Lyndon Farnham's government. It's 14 years since that was all kicked off, and we don't have a hospital built. That speaks to a decision-making problem. I have, and I agree, I have said a number of times that all members of the states are there to do things. No one is in the states because they want to put their feet up and do nothing. They are there because they want to help the island. But we have a system which divides the states, 21 people on one side in government, 28 people on the other side outside of government. And we need to find a way of including everyone in that decision-making process. And I think there is a way to bring advisory boards into ministries. And if you're on an advisory board, you can't be on the scrutiny panel to do that. You know, so you could scrutinize health, but be on the advisory board for education, perhaps. And I think that's an entirely reasonable way of doing things. And that would bring some of that wider participation, whilst at the same time enabling decisions to be made, because there'll be one accountable minister who listens to that board. And so I think there is things we can do, but I don't want the states to just talk about itself for the next 4 years.
Time's up. Next question, please. Yep, lady there in the grey, thank you.
Hello, Liz Ford, I live in Trinity. Will you be seeking a ministerial role? If so, which one? What makes you qualified for the role?
Okay, simple question. Will you be seeking a ministerial role? What one? And are you qualified? So that goes first to Peter McClinton.
Last time I stood in the States, I was asked by Andrew Green to become Assistant Minister for Health and Social Services. I enjoyed my time doing that, but it was just trying to get a hospital built, occupied so much of the time, as Kirsten has alluded to. Oh, how we tried and failed. What I did find when I was in ministerial government was it was really hard to stand up in the assembly and criticize the government you were a part of. So there was an implicit, be quiet, keep it cool, because you have to go along, shall we say. But I stayed in that position for the entire... It was the shortest assembly. It was the 3.5-year one before they pulled it into the summer election. So the answer to that question is no. I'm going to go to the other side because I want to be free to criticize. I want to be free to challenge. I want to be free to ask those important questions, and I want to be free to ask your questions. Scrutiny would be a definite possibility, but I'm far more interested in what our beautiful son James called Team Mac, which is when I speak to experts in any area and say, what have you seen that we haven't seen? What is your experience? And how can we form policy in the Assembly based on what you think? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Liz. So there's a slight oddity for me here, because the three other candidates have spent some time in the Assembly before, so know their way around some of the functions. I, as a first timer, if elected, feel that it would be appropriate for me to get some grounding. Now, so it is unlikely I would go directly into a ministerial role, although I would see that my skills within the healthcare sector, having run the pharmacy business I have and the community nursing schemes that I've been involved in, as well as the social enterprise, are all in social care. I would certainly be able to bring something into the health ministry as an assistant minister, as an advisor in that pattern. I have other areas, probably similar to Peter. I would like to look at and do things in other areas of government. And I'm particularly interested in function of government. I think we need to sort that out. But it obviously is going to be a much bigger job than just one person doing that. As I said in my speech, though, I'm really quite keen to look at how our three parishes work together. The move to this district system I don't think is overly popular. But the parishes are really, really strong in their own right, and I believe that actually they can, in certain areas, particularly around social care, become bigger than the sum of their parts if they work together.
Thank you. It's a very good question. And the answer from my perspective has to start from, I will only seek any sort of role depending on what the government wants to do. That's really fundamental. I will not support a government that does not want to invest in the economy. So I want the next government in Jersey, whoever is in the Council of Ministers, to support the economy. I want them to meaningfully look at waste across government. And that means they have to look at waste in the health service and the education service, and also in social security. And the reason I point out those three things is because they are by far and away the biggest spending areas of government. And I fear that the next government is going to continue doing what others have done, which is pick on the small departments because they care less about, people care less about external relations or economic development and so on. And they will pick on those departments, and what that will mean is if they do that, they will not be investing in the economy. They will be doing the opposite. So from my perspective, it does depend on what the government wants to do. My focus, though, is going to be on the parish and all three parishes. I want us to develop community schemes for housing. I want us to develop better networks, and I know Trinity's got a really good network for supporting people in their older age, and I want us to help try to ensure that we can diversify the economy for the young people to encourage them to stay here. I am happy to be in scrutiny or in government. I doubt I'll be seeking a big ministerial role, but I'm happy to be an assistant minister for the right government and the right government only.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Otherwise, I'll go into scrutiny very happily. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz, for your question. And when I was first elected, I was asked to be the Assistant Minister of Justice and Home Affairs and also the Environment. And I found it was fantastic because I learnt an awful lot and I had extremely good ministers. But where I found was I wasn't invited into the room. I wasn't able to put my point across. But because of collective responsibility, I was supposed to vote the way the government was going to vote in the Assembly, but without any space to be able to give my independent view. And of course, I had been voted from the 3 parishes as an independent deputy, and I found that a really difficult position, and often I came up with logheads on that situation. So, and then I went into scrutiny chair, and I have really enjoyed being the scrutiny chair for environment, housing, infrastructure, because I've been free to do that scrutiny. I had to bring my panel along with me. I've worked really hard, I think, across the Assembly with very different political colours in my panel, and we were able to really influence a lot of legislation because of that. So I've enjoyed that side. If I was, I think I'm similar with Kirsten, it would have to be who else is in the government for me to take that minister step, because you will be isolated. We've talked about that already with ministerial government, and I want to be working in a team that I know can do collaboratively together, and I can only do that if I know who the team is around. If it is anything, it would be environment and energy. I have that experience. I'd like to carry on, but
Thank you.
it depends
Hilary.
on the team.
Time's up. Next question, please. Lady here.
Hi, I'm Debbie Taylor and I live here in the parish of Trinity. I am also president of Optimist International Jersey, which is a service group whose mission is to improve the lives of women and girls here in Jersey and nationally and globally, in fact. I have a question particularly, therefore, aimed at women and particularly the Women's Health Strategy. In a survey taken by Public Health in 2024, it was found women and girls in Jersey are at a greater risk of poor health outcomes than men. And although women live on average longer lives than men, women spend many more years in poor health, at around 24 years more in poor health. So my question is, it's been delayed, the Women's Strategy, as you know, and it is due to be delivered by the end of the year. So my question is, what will you do to ensure that it is delivered as promised? And more importantly, will you commit to funding to support the strategy?
So will you commit to the Women's Health Strategy, make sure it's funded well? That goes first to Phil Romerell.
Thank you, Debbie, and I remember talking to you at the candidate fair. It's vital. It's vital that women's health is treated on an equal level to everyone else's. But that leads into the next question, because I've worked alongside health for about 20 years in different ways in the attempt to try and create a health strategy, full stop. Now, there isn't a general health strategy around the island in which something like this strategy would be delivered as part of. We've spent far too much time talking about buildings, building a hospital, for example, than actually working out how we can get people treated and looked after by people, and the people who are doing the treating looked after properly. And that's where the core root of a lot of our healthcare gaps comes from. So the answer to your question is absolutely, particularly as I've just said, I might be interested in an assistant health minister. This is an area I would look at, but it is part of a much bigger picture, and we really need to focus on healthcare across the island and develop a strategy and a funding mechanism for it which makes it fit for the future, because it has got real problems as it stands nowadays.
Thank you, Debbie. And yes, I also remember you asking this question. And, I had to admit, I've been focused on economic development for the last 4 years. And so health, Deputy Binney, Deputy Howell and Deputy Binney and have been working in that area, and Deputy Ward as well. And I'm very surprised that the Women's Health Strategy hasn't been delivered. I'm really disappointed that the Women's Health Strategy hasn't been delivered. What's even worse is it's not even just a Jersey problem. This is a global issue. Women's health is not treated with the same seriousness as men's health. And I find that fascinating, because I know that as I grew up, it was always the women who were far more interested in health. It was my mum who was teaching me to live a healthy life. Sorry, Dad, it wasn't Dad. And so I don't understand why we've not delivered it. There are specific issues around women's health. And the point is, from my perspective, if women are healthier in Jersey, then I can guarantee you families will be healthier in Jersey as well. And so it is absolutely fundamental that we commit to the health strategy and that we fund it. It's also really important that I mentioned the waste in the health service. It's important, if we're going to have this hospital work, we need a proper digitised health service. We need a health service that isn't grinding the people who work in it down. And I've seen that with my own eyes. And it's not right. We may have a shiny new hospital, but we need a health service that functions in a 21st century manner and delivers the care that we all need. And I would definitely want to see women at the heart of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, for your question. And actually, when there was the change of government and I became on the scrutiny side, I was invited by Deputy Hal to join the Women's Health Group, which was this cross both members of the government and those on backbenchers, so to speak, working together on trying to push forward different women's health issues. And one of the things that we had discussed was the women's health strategy, and it's something then that came into the scrutiny. The health scrutiny panel got it into the budget, got it onto the agenda, got money to get the work started. And so actually now there is I know that there is work underway to develop the women's health strategy. Now then, what is really important, of course, if we're elected and we go into the assembly, we will see this women's health strategy. It needs funding, because it's no point developing strategies, health strategy, women's health strategy, any kind of strategy throughout the whole of government if we don't have money behind it, because then that's just a piece of paper on a shelf. And so I think it's really important that we've had the momentum to build this women's health strategy. I know a lot of women have been working on it. I'll be going to a meeting on the 4th of June to develop it further and input it, and we need to then fund it. It is my manifesto, so it is something that I will be seeing through if I get elected. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Debbie. And yes, I think you did a very good job at the candidate. You got around everybody, you did. It does seem to me sometimes that we form strategies. It's almost like keep looking busy, but we don't see it through. And there's so much strategy put in place that isn't seen through to its logical conclusion. And it is ludicrous that this women's health strategy hasn't been seen through. It seems that we're all agreed, whichever three of us get in, that we will push for it to actually happen. There is so much time wasted, which is money which could be spent making sure that the women's health strategy becomes a thing that it must do. I have an idea generally in health that we have huge waiting lists for operations, both for men and women. My wife won't mind me saying she's had a hip operation. She has to wait probably 2 years for the next one. We have a problem with a built-up waiting list. If we invested some money in the consultants to do the operations like they do privately, because you can get in pretty quickly privately for an operation nowadays, so there is capacity, and we shorten the waiting list because we're going to spend more money down the line trying to get people operated on later. So this affects all members of society, and I really hope that we can get something through the Assembly to help.
Thank you. Okay, next question, please. Gentleman there in the brown jumper. Or Fawn.
My name is Frederick, and I live in the parish. I have a question about the cost of living, which affects us all. With the increased cost of living, there is a silent party that benefits, whereas everyone else does not benefit. And that silent party is the government, because of an increase in intake of GST. So what are the candidates proposing to do to give some of that back to the people of Jersey? Thank you.
Okay, so increase in GST, what candidates will you propose to do to give some of that back to ease the cost of living? That goes first to Kirsten Morell.
Thank you, Frederick. Really interesting question. I think that one of the first things I imagine a Treasury Minister might say is the increased cost of living affects the government too. So government's costs rise as the cost of living rises, and they rise with the cost of living. So it is not just a case that an increase in GST take is set against a set amount of costs. The cost for government will rise. But assuming, and it is an assumption, assuming GST intake rises faster than the extra costs, well, that will be then put into the way GST works is it gets put into the general circulation. And I would like to see that money used both, as I said, for diversifying the economy, and I want to see it built on an island plan that makes sure we have housing and make sure that we have economic development capabilities in this island. I think that will ultimately, whilst it's not putting money in your pocket today, that will create the long-term basis and foundation for sustainable growth in Jersey that we absolutely need. I would like, on the tax front, and I say this in my manifesto and online, I would like to see us freeze all duties. I think that's really, really important. And the main two duties there are fuel duty and obviously alcohol duty. But I think anywhere that government has those discretionary taxes, we should freeze them precisely because there is a cost of living rise. I think it's really important that government does that, because otherwise, as long as the Middle East war continues, we're going to see it hitting our pockets, and government can do something.
Thank you.
Potentially even reduce those duties, but definitely freeze them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frederick, for your question. And I think it's really important that the intake from these rises really goes back into the economy. And so there is especially supporting businesses to support the diversification of businesses. I know we had the support grants for businesses for productivity. I think those need to continue, and also to support apprenticeships as well, to keep young islanders on the island and kind of diversify that economy more and help build the skills of the young people that are here. So really putting in there, also related to the island plan, as Kirsten has said, that's coming in the next term, and really focusing on what is affordable housing, and innovation areas, innovation hubs, finding more places where we can have local economy, having businesses being able to work together, for example. So much more designated places around the island where you can have innovation hubs. And last, I know I am an environmentalist. I think it's really important, as I've said before. But we suddenly have a huge increase in fuel duties. And fuel prices, it will only go up, unfortunately. We can see that as the crisis continues. And so I would also be happy in seeing that freeze at the moment, because we have already over budgeted for the fuel duty we would have taken on this year in the budget because of that rise in the price of fuel.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to freeze it as well.
Thank you for the question, Frederick. We can't control global instability, war. It will affect the prices over here, but we can control how we react to the problems. Now, we'll talk about the fuel duty. It is an immense problem. We should be agile enough as a government to park the fuel duty until we're the other side of the problem. I think the question was about GST initially. GST, as I mentioned at the previous hustings, appears to be equitable at the till, because you get charged the same price on whatever goods you buy. But it's not equitable in real lives, because people with money won't notice a 30% hike in the price of, I don't know, digestive biscuits, but somebody who's struggling as a single parent will notice the difference, and the money that they spend on that they can't spend on the shoes for the kids or the uniform or what have you. So I think we do need to take a look at GST on essentials. I know people who have to buy in medical equipment have to pay GST on that medical equipment, and they're not helped, which is a ludicrous situation. We've got to make it easier for us all to get through our lives on this island. And as soon as government puts any barrier in the way of that. GST in some instances being a barrier. We really, really do have to look very hard at it.
Thank you, Frederick, for the question. It started off about cost of living and then moved into GST. And it's an interesting thing because obviously the government is doing quite well out of an increased cost of living in that it's getting a kind of bump up on its revenues. Historically, I fear that the government has looked, and I suspect this fits more into the civil service group rather than the politicians, that the extra revenues come as their money so that they can spend it on their projects and it gets absorbed very quickly and taken away. So there's a couple of things I'd like to endorse here. The idea of giving some kind of break on certain taxes around fuel, etc., which are going to affect heating going into the next year, because this shock that's about to come through our system over the next 12 months is going to probably start landing in November, December time. And that's going to be affecting people's heating. So that's got to be something that people need to be helped. Whether we choose to target the support more precisely into people who need support rather than doing it as a flat deduction is a question, I think, for the government, and it will be around how we choose to do that. Because, as I think it was Kirsten said again, we do have a situation where a 5% tax on someone with a lower income is a much bigger tax than it is on someone with a high income. So we maybe need to target some of the support from the revenues, extra revenues that are coming from GST.
Next question, please. Come on, you're not that shy. I'm sure you want to quiz your candidates. Okay, in the orange shirt.
Thank you. My name's Paul Trolick. I'm in St Lawrence, actually, so I'm sorry I feel a little bit awkward here. In 2024, I raised a petition calling on the government to exempt Social Security old age pensions from taxation. And this petition gathered more than 5,000 votes, or signatures rather. Unfortunately, the debate that ensued was not really a debate at all, and I think most people felt pretty aggrieved that it was handled very badly. I wonder, could the candidates please advise whether, if elected or re-elected, they would consider the exemption of old age pensions from taxation? Thank you.
Okay, straightforward question, which goes first to Hilary Jeanne.
Thank you, Paul. And I have had this question on the door when I've been going around the parishes. And so I thought I'd better look back on the debate and look back at the arguments that were put forward, especially from the government, because I was backbencher at the time. And I also think I actually got confused with reading back what actually was meant. And I think the main thing is that, of course, there is a threshold. So I think it's 20,000. You don't pay tax until 20,000. Of course, the state's pension is 14,000, so you get a bit more from other income that you get before you get taxed. Where I struggle, and I think I started to think a bit more, was that when you go over that threshold, instead of being taxed on the threshold, a bit on the threshold, you get taxed on the entire amount. And there I started to think, I'm not sure if that became apparent in those debates, and I think it's something that we could look at, because I would see that the way you start getting taxed is from that threshold above. And I would like to look into it further, and I also agree that the debate was difficult to follow. So for me, answering your question, I would like to look at this further and to talk again to the Social Security people who gave us those. They were the ones who told us that this was, as they put forward the debate and the Treasury Minister put forward the debate. I would like to look at this again.
Thank you. Time's up.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think we've had an online discussion regarding this. We have to take into account that there is tax breaks when you have a pension, so you do have to, you do get something back for holding a pension while you build it. However, at the end of the day, if you're on a fixed income, you're going to struggle immensely, and to have that taxed as well is just going to just nibble away at what you've spent your entire life trying to build up some sort of armory around yourself to get through your old age, not struggling. So I think there's something to be said for definitely raising that threshold so we can hold more money in our dotage to take care of ourselves. And again, it is a shame that, like so many things that seem to go through the assembly, it almost gets there, and then something comes along and it falls flat on its face, and we have to go through the whole thing again. And that is one of the many frustrations that we have in this island. It is, we as an assembly, should I be fortunate enough to get it through, must start looking at things more carefully, must be more outward facing. And this is why, when I said earlier that we really shouldn't be talking about ourselves, we should talk about the issues that islanders face. One of the first things we should do is sort this out. I mean, we have enough information. We have to raise that threshold. We have to be smart, and we have to help all levels of society.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that issue, Paul. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Paul. So this is an interesting area for me because I referenced earlier this project I was involved in called Island Longevity. And it took a view, the purpose of that was to take a view of how we can structure our society around the 100-year life, which is now becoming a reality, rather than a 70-year lifespan, which is what our current pension system is effectively built around. So it's led me to do a load of work with the pension industry over the last 8 months around what the pension system could look like in the future. And so I think on a more long-term view, I think we actually need to do a real full review on what a pension structure could look like. Because we have a state pension, some people have workplace pensions that layer on top of that, and then if you can afford to, you then develop certain saving mechanisms which actually give you more money when you get older. But if your life is based on that state pension, then you're struggling to get to the tax threshold that's been referenced here. And where there's an inequity in that is that you are taxed on your initial input through the social security system because it is not exempt from taxation. So if you happen to have other sources of income when you retire, you then also get taxed on above your threshold. And that is deeply unfair, and we need to deal with that because most international systems work on an exempt tax model, and that's what we should be looking as our base.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, this is a question that's come up on the doors, and it's a question that comes up regularly. And as Hilary mentioned, we've debated this over the past term. Treasury has a simple kind of set of 4 words when it comes to taxation. So Treasury will say this many, many times, and they'll have been heard in debate. Taxes in Jersey, from Treasury's perspective, are to be low, broad, simple, and fair. And I think that's absolutely fair enough. I'm happy with those 4 ideas. The problem with this pension issue is that it seems to be breaking the 4th of those, the fairness element. And to me, that's the thing that we need to make sure isn't happening. Quite simply, you shouldn't be taxed twice on the same money. If you are taxed twice, then it shouldn't happen. That, to me, that's about fairness. That's the 4th of those 4 principles. And so we need our system. If people are to be willing to be taxed in Jersey, they need to believe they are fairly taxed. And from my perspective, you should not get taxed twice on the same income. There are many different ways pensions happen. So, for instance, I know people who have bought, because they work for small businesses that don't offer pensions and private pensions, they bought, apartments, things like this to rent out. That's another form of pension. They would be taxed on that, and that's fine. But I will come back to the really simple idea. You don't get taxed twice on the same money, and therefore it's unfair. Therefore, it absolutely needs to be looked at again, and we need to get Treasury where we need to get them to be.
Next question, please. Who's got a question? Is there anybody else who's got a first question? We've got a lot of people. All of a sudden, all hands shoot up. Wonderful. I think you just marginally pipped him to the post over there.
My name's Colin Bunell. I'm in Trinity. As you're all independent candidates, and none of you have said that you would stand as the Chief Minister's job, do you believe that the Chief Minister should be one of the senators? And should the Chief Minister also be an independent candidate rather than a member of a political party?
Okay, should the Chief Minister be an independent candidate from the senators and not part of a party? That goes first to Peter McClinton.
Oh, thanks. I think, having been at the election the previous time through of a Chief Minister, it's very interesting to see the candidates put themselves forward for Chief Minister, make their speech, and then the Assembly decides. I have heard it asked if maybe the island's population could choose their Chief Minister, and I think there'd be a bun fight if that happened, if I'm honest. It'd be quite mad. I'm thinking now, as we move back to the system of senators, and the senators themselves are saying, we have an island-wide mandate, we are voted in by the majority of people on the island, then probably yes, I think the Chief Minister should come from the ranks of senators, but that should not preclude any deputy who fancies having a go at it to put their name in the hat at the initial sitting of the States Assembly to say, yes, I'm willing to try, and they'll be judged on their merits, on their speech, because, of course, the Chief Minister then gets to choose his or her government, and it's a huge responsibility. I'm very interested to see some of the senators who will put their hat in the ring. There's a consideration between the experience and understanding of how the Assembly works and fresh blood, which we certainly need as well. So I think we're in for an interesting time. I think I've answered the question, all that, but thank you. It was a bit of a scary question.
Right, yes. Well, I think the reality is going to be that the Chief Minister will come from one of the senatorial candidates because of the experience and because the nature of the Chief Minister's job is such a complex job. You really need to understand the whole functioning of government in itself, but also with its relationships outside the government people in itself. So I think although ministers themselves will naturally come, there'll be some deputies in those roles because there's 12 ministries at the moment and 9 senators, so that's bound to happen. I think the likelihood that the Chief Minister will be senatorial. Now, the second part of your question about whether they should be a party, I think the answer is it's the best person for the job, okay? So there's only one party, okay? So then you're obviously talking about a particular individual. Whether they can muster enough people for that individual to become Chief Minister is a different question, and I personally think it's unlikely. But actually, it has to be the best person in the job. One of the big problems with our government function is that we occasionally have the wrong person doing the wrong job on a political level, and that leads to inaction, lack of delivery, and a loss of direction from government. So those are my 2 answers to your question.
Thank you. And yes, in short, very short, the Chief Minister should be pulled from the senatorial candidates, or not the candidates, the winners of the senatorial election, and they will. I don't think for a second that the States Assembly would return a Chief Minister who is a deputy or connétable. I don't think that would ever happen. Certainly not immediately after an election. Maybe it could happen sometime, if there was another vote of confidence, but I don't even see that happening. One of the problems with getting rid of the senators was there was no clear island-wide mandate for the Chief Minister. And that caused problems, and we saw that. And that's one of the reasons why we ended up with 2 governments over the past 4 years. And so we need to have a Chief Minister with a clear mandate from the island. I don't think that means it has to be the leading senatorial candidate who is the Chief Minister. Ultimately, the states decide, and one of the reasons the states will decide that is because they know who they can work best with, who they think has got the best network, is best able to do it. I remember many years ago, it was the last place candidate for a senator who became Chief Minister. I remember at the time I wasn't best pleased with that as an islander. Ideally, they should be among the more popular senators, but they will be among the senators. from the perspective of should they be independent, they will be independent unless a party gets a majority in the States. And I can't see a party getting a majority in the States. And personally, the one party with any numbers in the States, I don't particularly support myself.
Thank
so I
you.
wouldn't be voting for their candidate at all for Chief Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for your question. And it's going to be similar answers all round. I think, though I left when I was 18, and I haven't actually ever seen senatorial. I came back halfway through the John Lafondre government, so this is will be the first time for me to see how this all works out. But I know very well that the Chief Minister has to come from the senatorial candidates and those who will win in the senators. And I agree also with Kirsten that it doesn't have to necessarily be the top person, but it's for them to decide who puts themselves forward, and for the Assembly as a whole to decide when they tell us how they are going to be a Chief Minister. That's really, really important, and they have to sell that individually to each of us to win our vote for that. So I think that's really important, that I believe it should come from Senator. From the political party, I personally wouldn't be voting for a political party. We have two political parties in the Assembly, but one has a senator, obviously is in the senatorial candidate race. I would not be voting for that political party. I think it comes from an independent, but they are very welcome to put their candidate forward for the senator race. It is a democracy, and we all need to be able to put our viewpoint. If they want to be Chief Minister, they can.
Thank you. And the question was from yourself here, Jane. Gentleman here in the cream jumper. No, in front. That's it. Yep, you're heading the right way.
Thank you. My name is Evan Smith, resident of Trinity. So there was a recently commissioned independent expert review that made clear that Jersey has encouraged firms into the pharmaceutical sector without adequate governance or oversight. Urgent reforms are needed, and the health ministers have started the work, but some in the industry argue that the status quo is sufficient and are framing reform as an obstacle. So, would you commit publicly to seeing this work through, if elected, and ensure safe medicine and support economic diversification, or will we let public policy and long-term strategy be shaped by the short-term commercial interests of the sector the policy is meant to oversee? And how would you ensure that policy in complex areas such as this in future are shaped by qualified experts and not corrected years later after significant political and financial commitments?
Okay, quite a question. So, would you support regulation of the pharmaceutical industry? How would you see that that's done and make sure that it stays, basically? Am I right? Yes. Pretty much it? Okay.
I'm not entirely sure I'll manage to get three answers to all of your questions in a minute and a half. But Evan, we've talked loads of times. I know you well. I know your concerns. You expressed them a couple of 3 years ago, and I think some of that has bubbled to the top. What's really interesting to me, so I'm going to skirt around your question slightly, because what's interesting to me is I think I talked about economic diversification earlier, and I think this is an area that Jersey has huge opportunities. I know through various projects that I've been doing, I'm talking to you, that there are people wanting to do stuff in Jersey. It seems obvious with your example that the regulatory structure needs to be right to allow companies, businesses, research agencies to develop something that can be exported and sold in a manner that increases the revenues for Jersey companies, Jersey government, Jersey taxpayers, etc., etc. So I'd be very supportive in helping get that through. I think we touched on, and Kirsten talked about ministerial panels. I think we probably need to create some kind of delivery group around it, which would cut across the departments that get impacted with this kind of thing, rather than it just being a health issue. But I see huge economic opportunities here for Jersey, because we do need to diversify away from just the finance industry base. That's my answer.
Thank you, Evan. Good to see you. And we've discussed this a number of times as well. And I So for those who aren't entirely sure what the question was about, the question, I can see Evan's filming the answer as well, so this is likely to go online, I guess. Evan is concerned about the kind of biopharmaceuticals industry in Jersey and the need for it to be regulated in order for it to succeed. And I, alongside the Health Minister, Deputy Binney, have commissioned a piece of work into this. And just before the election period started, we met with the Jersey woman who did that work, and we've pushed it forward into the next stage, which is to try to develop a regulatory system for the development of pharmaceuticals in Jersey. This is really important because the pharmaceutical industry is one of the areas we're diversifying into. It's high value, it's low footprint, and there are some fantastic businesses in Jersey. I know the medicinal cannabis industry has been getting a lot of publicity, but we're also diversifying into very different areas than that as well. So it is quite fascinating. But Jersey, if it has a regulatory system, which it will need to be able to export internationally, also needs to make sure it maintains a regulatory advantage. In finance, for instance, we've seen how that regulatory advantage may be being diminished in places, and the competitiveness program is there to maintain that advantage. Jersey should always make sure it's got the regulation it needs to compete, but also the regulation that gives itself an advantage, and that means not over-regulating. So that was the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan, for your question, and we also have talked about it as well, and something that then from our talks I've gone to the Health Minister and talked about the work that Kirsten was talking about that commissioning that work, looking into a regulatory system. I think it's important that those who are elected and going into the new government continue that work and see it through and see where the best system could be developed, as Kirsten said, with the regulatory advantage, so not over-regulating. I think the most important is that it's safe to begin with, and that is really important. We don't want to be exporting anything from Jersey that isn't safe, that could cause problems in the future and put Jersey in a bad place internationally. It's important that we diversify the economy, and today in the JAP there is a huge article exactly about this biopharmaceutical industry and about the developments we could have in Jersey, and that's really exciting. And it's something that I would urge the government, the future government, to be working very closely with, making sure we're giving those right support to be able to develop that industry here, to do the right regulation to make it able to export the highest quality that we can have, the safest products that we can have, so that we can get the best out of value for those products, so then we can take advantage of that as an island. I also think, though, it's very important, environmental impact assessments and the impact on the environment and neighbours is also extremely important.
Evan, thank you. And again, we've been in contact, I'm sure. I think it's one of those areas where we could carve out a very high-value future for the island if we do it right. We rely far too much on the finance industry, and we have to diversify. What we need to do is make sure, obviously, that these structures in place so that the people in the biopharma, in fact, any of the industries which we can encourage to move through the island, not necessarily relying on finance, but, if you like, satellite industries, are regulated properly so they can go out into the world and not trip over themselves and not waste so much time and money trying to get something set up on this island when we say you can, and then we go whoop and pull the rug out from underneath you, which is something I'm sure we've discussed before. The problem with Jersey is it doesn't seem to realise it's small and it can move quickly. For some reason, we move more slowly, and I've yet to understand why that is. It just beats me. We should be able to be agile and adapt to the suggestions, for example, the biopharma industry are coming up with, to say, look, can we make it as easy as possible for you to do your business, to encourage young people to get into that industry over here, to build a knowledge base on the island so they can, the planet can turn to us and say, good grief, they've got it right. So taking your advice into the assembly, meeting together as a group and can constructively decide how to introduce that into the assembly would be wonderful. So, too right, and thank you, by the way, for what you do. Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
My name's Wendy. I'm a parishioner of Trinity, and I'd like to ask the candidates from a parish standing, can you answer the question, do the government departments that have an impact on parishes, do they get consulted, and are they entitled to have enough say when it affects a lot of the parishioners on a daily, weekly basis? The other question is, from our taxes, budgets, do the candidates feel that the right investment in budgets year on year is built in for the maintenance, infrastructure of the island? Because we are facing a lot of problems from previous governments that haven't put in the right investments.
Okay, I'm not sure that all candidates could answer the first element of your question about whether or not government consults with the parishes, because not all candidates have been in government. If you're all happy to, then that's fine. And the other part was, do we need to invest more in infrastructure? Do you think that government's invested enough in infrastructure? Okay. So do you agree that government has not invested enough into infrastructure over the years? Thank you. Sorry, that goes first to Kirsten. Yep. Sorry, Kirsten, yep.
That's okay, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And are the parishes consulted enough? I think that the answer most likely is very much no. And one of the things I'm standing for, and I put in on my website, you can see it there, it's on the leaflets that you got tonight, is we need a much more caring government. And that's a government that isn't just caring behind policy documents, but actually cares in its actions every day. And that means that it needs to work with the parishes. We see it here. We've seen the disruption caused to businesses in Trinity. We're currently seeing today the disruption being caused to businesses in Zion. And I understand that. The work needs to happen. I get that. But is it consulted with properly? Are the people who are affected consulted properly? No, they're not. And government needs to change that. It's a refrain all the time. Communication. Why is the communication so poor? And that's something I would really love to work on. Having worked in communication in the past, that's something I'd love to work with government on. Do we invest in maintenance? So this has been a refrain of mine for the past 8 years. No. It's really simple. Government doesn't invest enough in either the infrastructure or, and even worse in many ways, it builds the infrastructure and then doesn't maintain the infrastructure. This has been a story for 30 years. There's no one government, but there are people who have been around in government for a long time who were just as responsible then as they are now for not investing. We need to maintain, because otherwise, yes, this is what happens. Everything happens in one big go. We're right to sort it out now, but it should have been maintained over many, many decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for your question. And on your first one, I think it's really important that there is more of a communication and support and work between the parishes and the government. There was a scrutiny review that was done by Deputy Miles just before the end of this term, looking at that relationship between the parishes and the government, looking on areas like waste, roads, policing and the honorary system, rates, all those different areas, and came up with some really good recommendations. And I think it's really important that whoever gets in as a deputy, and of course within our constituency we have 2 contested Conotab races as well. I think it's really important that the deputies who get in work very closely with those Conotabs to look at the scrutiny review and look at the recommendations and see what we can do to help change and support the parish to work with the government and vice versa, and if we are on scrutiny, any of us, to push that and bring the voice of the parishes within those scrutiny reviews as well. I completely agree with you, not enough has been done in maintenance in the past, whether we've built the infrastructure ourselves or we have taken it over and we've not done enough. We just passed in the States Assembly at the end of the term something called the Capital Investment Fund, which will ring-fence money specifically to support infrastructure going forward. And I absolutely think it's really important that we get that right. And that's the next government and the Assembly to get that Capital Investment Fund right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Wendy. It's a bit like at a personal level that we often feel that government has been done to us, not for us. Ditto at a parish level, as has been evident really that it happens at us. Now, the whole of the system should exist for all of our benefit. And what I am really emboldened, as I alluded to before, is both the candidates for constable are really willing to work with their deputies. So to have another 3 conduits straight into the Assembly to fight the cause of the parish is a very good thing. It also comes off the back of the fact that we have our senators now who can, if you like, be the top level that we hold to account. It is vital that we break down barriers everywhere. It is so important that we treat our parishes as precious gems and we try to look after the people who live in them, because ridiculously, the parish isn't separate from the island. We're all lumped on this straight but beautiful piece of pink granite, and we all have to work together. We're all connected, and so it's ridiculous that there is anything that is ever, by any government department, done to us rather than for us. So we should all work together on that, absolutely.
Wendy, well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you in getting 2 questions in. I think you're following on from Evan, who got 3 questions in, so we've got a thing going. First, I'll do the second one first. Okay, the answer is no, the island is terrible at investing and maintaining its infrastructure. It always has been. It goes through spurts where it seems to try and sort itself out, but then it falls down a trap of always finding somewhere else to spend money. And I think we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's a proper investment structure, as there would be in any business, in any of its capital investments, written into the actual project. Now, your first question, which is the one that's really interesting to me, government is terrible at consulting with everyone. I don't think they particularly pick on parishes. They're just rubbish at it, really, to be honest. And we need to deal with that. A future government needs to learn how to listen to people properly. Now, when I reference again, I'm going to reference the Island Longevity Programme again, because one of the reasons why that has been so successful, and we've engaged with hundreds of people, there's a framework document that looks at what life could look like for a 100-year model. The leadership team on that decided from day one not to engage with any civil servants and any politicians, because it was more effective for us to deliver it with them. It was a pure grassroots movement, and we got people involved speaking their mind from the start, and it delivered. So government needs to learn from that kind of project.
Another question? Anybody got another question?
Sorry, me again, sorry.
Oh, you've had a second question. Is there anybody else who's got a first question? Sorry, gentleman here. Sorry, we'll do second questions once everybody's had the chance to do first.
Yeah, good evening, Steve Taylor, Trinity. We all hear a lot about net zero, but it doesn't come for free. So I'd like to hear the candidates' views on Jersey's net zero journey, and how much are you willing to see it benefit islanders versus being a cost for them?
So what do candidates think about net zero and how much it's going to cost?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's benefits versus costs. Well, that goes first to Hilary Jeanne.
Thank you for the question. I think if we're going to go into the carbon neutral roadmap, which is where the island has signed up to the Paris Agreement through the UK, to these binding net zero targets. Actually, if you strip that all away, you're looking at how to support islanders on transport and on heating, because those are the biggest areas where we are emitting carbon. But at the same time, now we're in a situation where we've got the Straits of Hormuz. We're talking about rising fuel prices. We've talked about it, the cost of living. Actually, why don't we flip it on its head and say, actually, we still need to support islanders in diversifying on transport and diversifying on their heating systems to be able to insulate their homes better, to reduce the energy costs, to diversify on how you heat your homes. The same with transport. How can we support people so that they aren't using so much petrol that's so expensive? And when we start looking at that, we can support and use the grants that are there directly from the fuel duty. There's the 2p from fuel duty and for vehicles emissions duty. That's the only cost, the money that comes into the carbon neutral roadmap is from those two costs. If we can put those grants to help islanders reduce costs around their energy, I think that's really important, and that's a better message than talking about net zero as this big wide open thing. If we break down the carbon neutral roadmap, that's really the heart of it.
Thank you.
It will be very hard to follow Hillary on that one because she knows her stuff. It's that we appear to be running into a policy which is large, countryside-sized policy for a little island that barely makes a mark on the environment. It doesn't mean we shouldn't take our responsibilities very seriously. However, I think we are committing a ridiculous amount of money to trying to get net zero, where we have so many other places we can put that money. We are not the UK. We are not France. We have to be island-sized in everything that we do. And we do this in so many areas. We decide that we have to bring over experts who are experts in large population problems for a population of a little over 100,000. We have to make sure that we do things that are suitable for the island. We still have to take our planetary responsibilities seriously, but I think we're blundering to something here which is going to cost us a ridiculous amount of money as we move forward. We really, really, really have to sit down and work out a Jersey-sized version of our responsibilities to planet Earth.
So this is a really interesting thing. The impact that the current strategy has on the cost of living of everyone on this island is unrecognisable, actually, and that's one of the big dangers. This is a classic example of a programme, a strategy that was brought through the Assembly which did not have clear costings attached to it. There's some ideas of how much it will cost through the taxpayer, but for the individual themselves, with the cost of actually helping Jersey meet this artificial target, it's just not clear. And I think with what's in front of us, we've alluded to taking duty off petrol, etc., with what's in front of us, with the spikes that are going to come through. We really have to rethink this and think more closely about it. The reality is Jersey already sits within the top percentage of nations as far as its carbon impact. It's tiny, regardless of whether you're talking about percentages or numbers, but actually it performs really well because most of our electricity and energy comes from a nuclear power scheme in France. We have an impact, and we can certainly make improvements on our use of fossil fuels, but trying to squeeze it into this really short timeline at huge cost just does not seem sensible. And I think we really need to review what we're doing for the benefit of islanders rather than an image.
Thank you. And from my perspective, I've always believed that environmental gain is usually a win-win situation, especially when you're dealing with waste and pollution. You reduce waste, you reduce your own cost. It's that simple. And so I've always argued, and I've argued in the States on a number of occasions, including back when I was in scrutiny, that we should always have a proportionate approach to our carbon emissions. You'll see it on my manifestos, that I do talk about reducing our dependency on oil. I do think that's fundamentally important, but today it's not important just because of the environment or just because of the climate change, and I use that just advisedly. It's also important because we can see the strategic advantage you gain as an island if you're not having to buy petrol and oil, or you can reduce your costs in oil and petrol, which are being affected by wars, which are being created by people that we have no control over. So the less oil and petrol we all use, the less we are impacted by those wars. That helps us all. And I will continue to argue for that. But our approach to that, and as far as public funding is concerned, always has to be proportionate to what we can, one, afford, and two, the impact it will actually have. To fill out Phil's numbers there, I believe we're the third in Europe in terms of how good we are for our our carbon emissions. Iceland, number 1, because it has geothermal energy. Sweden, number 2, and us, number 3. That's really good. And so a lot of people have to catch up with us before we start catching up with them. Thank you.
Next question. And Jane, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. I'd love to ask a question.
Quite all right. Go for it. Hand the microphone back to yourself afterwards, please.
Indeed, I will. So I live and work in Trinity, and I work with a lot of businesses that are small and medium businesses. My question is, if elected, what 3 specific measures would you introduce to cut red tape for local businesses in Jersey? And which existing rules or processes would you be prepared to change or remove?
Okay, straightforward, thank you. How would you cut red tape, and which particular ones would you get rid of first? So that first goes to Peter.
I have, Jane, a thing called the Jersey filter, which is something I would desperately love for all states members to view everything through. So if you just bear with me, I'll run this past you. Does this genuinely improve life for ordinary islanders? Does it strengthen Jersey long term? Does it reduce bureaucracy and friction? Is it fair in real life and not just on paper? Does it deliver value for money, protect our identity while preparing us for the future, connect positively to other parts of island life, and does it make Jersey more resilient, hopeful, and sustainable? With regard to all of our lives, stripping out any barriers to trade, any barriers to business, there is a model that's running in Manchester whereby any policy, any rule that is put in, two have to be removed. We're looking at reducing friction across the board. Now, I'm more interested in talking to you about what you're finding is stopping you from doing what you need to do than me just telling you what I'm going to do to you. Because again, it's about talking to people and getting feedback as to how we, as an assembly, can improve your life, not having government done to you or at you, but asking you what you want to be removed or put in place to make business, in this instance, work better for you. And I'm happy to have a chat anytime you like about that, Jane. And good microphone work.
Thanks, Jane. So I've got personal experience of this. So I bought and set up my first business when I was 23 in 1991. And it was straightforward, easy, and simple. The last 4 or 5 years, I've tried to set up 3 or 4 not-for-profit organisations which are focused on community good, and it is almost impossible. You just lose the will to live because of the hoops you have to jump through. So this is personal experience. The things I found most frustrating is registering businesses, going through that whole number of people that you have to do with, work with, and it seems so repetitive and unnecessary and prolonged, and you have to get permissions from this person and that person. When some of these things are just really, really simple, okay? The next one is employment licenses. I mean, it's just crazy. I'm just trying to create work for people who are then doing community good, and I'm having to jump through hoops. And I'm going to use a really big catch-all at the end, and that is we have a finance industry which has provided huge amounts of income into our tax system. And to protect it, the government has put lots of regulation in to protect its viability. The problem is that gets applied equally to small local businesses that cannot cope with it. and it is just ridiculous what's
Thank
happened to some of the small businesses on this island.
So, Jane, this is why I became a politician, many ways in the first place. It was myself being a small business owner, my wife being a slightly bigger but still small business owner, and knowing the pain and seeing the pain that my wife had to go through. So things, and as Economic Development Minister, that's why I changed the alcohol licensing law. It was to make that simpler. Why are we having 7 categories of license? We've got 3 now, on, off, temporary, simple, done. I've deleted vast swathes of the tourism order because it was just unnecessary red tape. So I've already been delivering on red tape. I would also, though, commit government, when it starts a tender process, and don't think this is about ferries, nothing to do with ferries, when it starts a tender process, it has to take it to the end, and it has to give feedback to those who didn't succeed in that tender. I've seen too many processes where businesses are just waiting. When are they going to get back to me? They never... I handed in the forms, I did everything, they never got back to me. That's unacceptable. Social security, especially so absolute business startups, they need to have that social security holiday at the beginning. And because it's one of the hardest things, it's one of the things that stops entrepreneurs in this island. They're leaving employment, they want to become self-employed, the social security stops them. So we need to provide them with a holiday. And the other thing I'd say is, mentioned before, a single business registration process. And it's got to be digitized. Because at the moment, there are just too many different departments, the regulatory department, the JFSC, etc. It needs to be one process to make that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. It's very difficult to go after the economic minister in this answer, but it's something that obviously we had the barriers to business report from 2023, and there were really 8 specific areas identifying where the barriers were, and we've heard some of those tonight, where businesses have asked for a streamlined entry point in all the areas. So not just in when you're setting up a business, but going to just speak to one person and one department to cover all the areas, rather than it being a multitude of departments. That communication, understanding legislation and processes. I think it is important to identify that yes, the regulatory system is set up for the finance industry and for that high level big businesses that we are catering for the island, and it has affected negatively small businesses, local entrepreneurs, and we do need to have, I think, understanding about that proportionality when it comes to small businesses in the future of when we're looking at future legislation as politicians, but also reviewing legislation that's passed. The alcohol license and the food licensing law were one of those 2 of the areas we've just looked at, where we tried to streamline to ensure that there was that they would be better for small businesses as well. And finally, social security. That's when you want to go into being a startup and set up your own business as a sole trader, have that holiday, I think is extremely important. It's happened to me, so I think it has to happen. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else with a first-time questioner? Yep. Mike in the front there.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Mike Stenterford, La Commune, borderline Trinity. Despite its early controversy, Jersey's first solar farm has... sorry, I'm going to put my other glasses on. Just talk amongst yourselves, people.
Jersey's first solar farm.
That's what I got to. Right, fine. Has also met with surprising success by outperforming JE's initial forecast by some 30%. At the same time, we all know that Jersey is facing a multitude of serious community-based challenges, each one deserving of a political solution. Sadly, but unsurprisingly, such upheavals are placing the environment towards the back end of the queue. So the question is, can the island continue with its proposed future green initiatives, or might a new government possibly be reluctant to do so?
So which initiatives, sorry?
Sorry?
Which initiatives? Green initiatives. Okay, so can we continue with green initiatives? going forward with all the other issues that the island has to face. Thank you. So that goes first to Phil Rummerell.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This kind of touches on the question about carbon net zero, because I think that's the large driver behind the activities around renewable energy models. I think the island should do. I think there's no reason why it can't do it. I suspect within the solar farm model, it looks like it's a commercial operation, so it's been worked up in that model. There are other things. I think the wind farm has been discussed ad nauseum and is probably unlikely to happen because of the complications there. But I think Jersey should do that. I mean, I think the priority, though, has to be looking after the population and any impact on their day-to-day costs at this moment in time, because there's some pretty scary stuff coming down. But actually, I can't see any reason why you wouldn't support a green renewable future, because, as Hilary said earlier, let's get people out of petrol and out of oil, but let's just do it at a sensible time that doesn't break people's banks and their backs.
So a really good question, Mike, because I think one of the things that I've found fascinating over the past 4 years is seeing, 4 years ago, the 2022 elections, the environment was a really big issue. It was possibly the number one issue. And here we are 4 years later, and I think you're right, it's pretty much dropped off many people's radars. I disagree. I'm, as everyone knows, like everyone here, but Jersey born, for me the environment is so stark, it's so close to us. We live next to the sea, it's, salt on our faces, etc., the green fields. We know that the environment is vital. And so like many, and I think all of us here, I think we know green initiatives have to continue. As I've said, many green schemes can actually be win-wins, where you're reducing cost because you're reducing waste. If you're able to walk to the corner shop rather than drive to the corner shop, you've reduced waste and you've reduced cost. That's a good thing, and that can be scaled up to many different areas. And so I will always push for that. Jersey as well, it's really interesting. When you look at other OECD countries, we spend more per head on the environment than all the others. But at the same time, and this shows what those other countries are doing, we don't spend that much compared to others. I think we spend, Hilary can correct me, but I think we spend 11 to 12 million a year directly in the Environment Department. We spend 23 or 24 million on overseas aid. And so we spend double elsewhere than we do here. So our 11 million, 12 million isn't very much, and yet every other country is spending less than us. That worries me. I want, in terms of they need to step up to the mark.
Thank you.
Because Jersey's doing good work, but we've got to continue
Thanks.
it.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. I absolutely think that we should see the environment as an investment and not a cost. It's really, really important that we see that win-win in what we do, and it's not a cost for us as individuals. It's being able to think that we can walk to the shops or being able to take the bus rather than drive, that will then have to pay for that petrol that is more expensive than using public transport. We have to see that the cliff paths are part of our visitor economy to attract visitors in, and also part of our well-being and health, so that we reduce our costs on our health in the long term. It's about prevention and well-being. We have to see about supporting the environment and biodiversity for our farmers. For those who are producing food for us, it's really important, I think, that we really support our farmers to produce more local on island, so that we don't have to import and be worried about the cost of food out there. As fertilizer increases, we are going to see huge increases in cost of food, and being able to produce more on the island and supporting our farmers is really important. So my manifesto, it has parts of this where we need to support the stewards of our environment, whether that is fishers who are supporting the marine, whether it is our farmers who are supporting our biodiversity, whether it is the heritage and the coastline and the National Trust, for example, and Trees for Life, very important. So we have to support all those. Energy strategy as well is really important. It's something I pushed
Thank
for,
you.
and we need to deliver in the next government.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, it's so good to see you, and thanks for all that you do. How can we not support future green initiatives? How can we not take care of the future for this island? I do understand, as Kirsten was saying, that it's kind of slipped down the hierarchy as the world's gone crazier and crazier, and it is such a shame because we are our environment. There's an idea for some reason that agriculture is somehow nostalgia, but it isn't, it's resilience. We have to be able to feed ourselves as much as we can do over here. Therefore, we have to look after the environment so we can grow our food, we can look after our fisheries. The more that we maybe get local schools, a hospital, and so on and so forth to reach out into our agriculture industries for the food instead of sourcing it from outside, the more resilient we'll be. And I'm all for, I love it when I see solar panels on roofs, because I'm thinking, well done you're harnessing the natural energy of the sun and not destroying your planet incrementally, bit by bit, in doing so. So any assembly that moves forward from this moment has to realize that everything is connected. You know, the environment isn't a siloed thing over here that we might have a look at. It's connected to everything else that we do. So absolutely, we have to treasure our environment. Yes.
Thank you. I've got time probably for 2 more questions. So anybody else? 2 at the back there. Lady in red and the lady in grey. So we'll come to you both.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm from Trinity. I'm also a civil servant. I've stood here this evening and heard the civil servants constantly being blamed for over-expenditure. Could you please define what you see as a civil servant and give me some examples of some of those frontline essential civil servants? Because we are constantly being downtrodden and walked over and being blamed for everybody's over-expenditure.
Thank you. I think that's straightforward. And that question will first go to Kirsten Morell.
Thank you. I'm not sure I've heard civil servants being blamed today. That's not what I've heard. What I've heard is systems, and what I've spoken to, for instance, I talked about the healthcare system. I see nurses and doctors and wardens and people working. They're not, I agree, they're not civil servants, but I see them working in a system, the system which creates duplication and creates waste and creates very difficult jobs for them. I speak to doctors who tell me about a system which hurts them and makes life difficult. This is the system, it's not the people. I've spoken to 2 people in healthcare who told me about toxic environments. Those are not things, that's a system which is not working for them. So it's really important that when we talk about waste, people understand that that is not about people. It's about systems. It's the fact that we still have a paper-based system for most of our healthcare. That's ridiculous. It's the 21st century. Nobody can tell me that that is a good use of our money to have a paper-based system. That's not an attack in any way on any single person who works in public service. And so that's what I talk about. When I talk about waste in any part of government, it's always about those systems. I cannot tell you whether somebody's job is important or somebody else's job is less important or more important. I don't know. But I do know that I can see when people themselves on the front line are fighting the system they're working in, and I know that that is wrong.
Thank you.
That's what needs to change.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I also feel that we've more talked about the systems that we need to try to improve than it actually is about the people, because I think it's been really important that we recognise that there are people out there in the civil service and the public sector who really do a fantastic job. And it's something that we brought up time and time again in scrutiny and talked to ministers when they were saying they were cutting, they had to cut from their budgets. And we would ask, well, what are you cutting? How are you cutting? And there was always a question about it. Just it seemed to be like there was just had to be a cut without understanding what that looked like from an impact, both on those who are working. It meant that we have to have slower legislation coming forward. It means we have slower implementation of policies. This is the reality of if we are going to start cutting these important bits of work that we're doing. And that's the reality. If we're saying it took 8 years for the divorce law, for example, to come through for us to be able to reform the divorce law, is going to be the reality from now in as we start, if they're in the next government, reduces the amount of civil servants to work on things and also consultants. That's what the public have called for, but it does mean that this will be slower to come about. I think it's really important to not have slash and burn. I think we have to understand what the impacts are when we start cutting. JET is a perfect example. Jersey Employment Trust is a perfect example of what happens when you just cut without understanding the impact.
Lindsay, I'm so sorry that you feel put upon, and blaming civil servants for a system that doesn't work is a bit like blaming the windscreen wipers because the car doesn't work very well. You, as civil servants, are struggling with a system that's broken, and you're trying to deliver within a broken system, as they've just alluded to. We have to strip out areas in any system that are simply getting in the way of anybody and everybody being able to do their job as best they can. So this isn't about the people that are working within the system, it's about the system itself. And we've become bloated in every way, shape and form, in every area of the state. And we really need to hack away to find out where we can operate minimally, with a minimal amount of barriers, so that we can be a success, because nature itself doesn't put extra steps into anything it does. We as humans seem to have managed to do so. How are we going to evolve unless we take away all the noise and the nonsense and the friction and help people to do their jobs better? So it's not blaming civil servants, it's blaming the system with which the civil service has to operate. So sorry that you feel put upon, I really am. Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you for your question, and I'm sorry you're feeling quite upset, because that came very clearly through the way you phrased your question. Look, there's experiences here. My view on what is happening is that there's a trust triangle that should exist in our society between the public, the politicians, and the civil service teams. And that's broken. I wrote an article in the JP a few months ago, and we have to restore that, because what it's leading to is people within that triangle not trusting one another and not seeing what the good things that other people do are. Now, I've worked alongside the civil service in the health department for about 25 years. I used to negotiate on behalf of the community pharmacy, businesses, etc. And I've sat in meetings around trying to get health strategies built, etc., etc. I've sat in rooms where I've been in a meeting giving my time freely with 20 other people, all salaried, sitting there, and then trying, because my business approach is to get an actions out of meetings, seeing no actions. That's a system that's got 18, in that case, civil servants sitting in, doing meetings and actually not producing anything. Now, that is not about the people. That is, as has been said here, it's about a system that's failed, and it's failing you as well as it's failing everyone in this room. And that is why it's critical that we reform the way the government is working in the future.
And it's a lady at the back in the red who had her hand up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda from Trinity. This is a question about housing. Private landlords are often portrayed as greedy and uncaring. In my opinion, the landlords I know are not like that. They're not greedy, they're not uncaring, and they have to deal with some terrible tenants as well. Recent figures show that 77 landlords have left the market in the year up to March 2026. Do you think this is the beginning of an exodus of private landlords from the market, and what would you propose to do to stop it?
Okay. Do you think it's the beginning of the end for private landlords exiting the market, and what would you do if you were elected? Hilary?
Thank you, Linda, for your question. I hope it's not an exodus. I think that there has been a number of decisions that have been made around landlords the last few years around the license, the dwelling license, and also the residential tenancy law. I talked to the JLA the other day, and they said they'd send us their manifesto. And I said, well, I hope that we aren't going to do much more in the next government around landlords, because I feel that that regulation has already been there, and we need to make sure that it works well for both tenants and for landlords. The residential tenancy law has only just come in April, and we need to embed that and make sure that it is working well, and that landlords feel supported, that they can implement that kind of legislation. We worked hard as a scrutiny panel to scrutinise that law and amend it to make it more acceptable for both tenants and for landlords. And I think we did, because all 8 of our amendments were passed, and I fought very hard in the Assembly to make sure we had a more balanced residential tenancy law. The licensing scheme we've been scrutinising, and I think that has started to be very much supported amongst landlords to help that health and safety, because landlords want to make sure that they are providing good homes for their tenants. So for me, I think it's really important we don't push more landlords out of the system, and we need to support them in those legislation and not do any more.
We can't keep saying that housing is one of our top priorities and not support everybody in the system to be able to provide the housing. It is just ridiculous. Now, there seems to be some sort of Dickensian landlords, they are wicked people kind of nonsense, but without the private sector landlords helping us house people, and we're very fortunate because we've had excellent landlords, but you need to be supported. It's a bit like Lindsay's civil service question. It's like, why demonise landlords? I mean, they're very, very important part. So what I'd be interested in doing, as always, is talking to yourself, talking to landlords as to how we, because the Assembly, the government, are supposed to serve you and support you in doing the best work that you can do, and actually find out, rather than tell you how we'd solve the problem, why the private landlords are leaving the business, as it were. And it's very important to understand where people's problems are, rather than be prescriptive and tell them what their problems are and then tell them what our solutions are to it. So I absolutely think that everybody should be supported and doing the best they can for everybody else, because everything is connected.
So the problem with this conversation is that the starting point should have been about looking after people, but it was actually about delivering on an ideology of a political party who have demonized a part of our population who are providing housing. Now, I am sure there are some disreputable landlords, and they do need to be dealt with, but the regulation was already in place to allow these people to be dealt with, but it was never enacted. And the group, the party who led on this, actually the introduction of the recent legislation, which is forcing landlords out, and it will do more and more, is just blind to it, to be strictly honest, and isn't prepared to look at anything other than his own ideological position. I had a coffee about this with him, and had a conversation with him when he started this off, and I did flag that what he's effectively going to do is drive small local people out of this marketplace and leave the entire housing stock with corporate landlords. And I cannot understand why someone from his ideological base wants to back big corporations, because that's what he's doing.
So I'm going to carry on from where Phil left off. I actually disagree slightly. I don't think he is going to push people into big corporate landlords. He wants the government to do it all. And that's what worries me even more. And I should state, I am a private landlord. I own 2 small one-bedroom flats that I rent out. So it is important that I do state that. But it remains to be seen. I need to work out do I stay or not with regard to being a landlord? Because the terms of that business have changed. But what worries me the most is that Jersey's success has always been predicated on the private sector carrying the majority of the burden. That's why we don't pay a 40% tax rate in Jersey. And we couldn't afford to pay a 40% tax rate in Jersey because living on a small island, we'd become really unattractive very quickly. And so government has always got to work with the private sector. It's that simple. I strongly believe it. And actually from the private sector is where you get innovation. And from small families being landlords, and even sometimes companies being landlords, you get innovation. You don't get much innovation from government. That's not where innovation tends to come from. It can come from there, but you don't tend to get it from there. So I really worry that this is a bigger question, that this is actually a bigger push to ultimately have government being the sole provider of accommodation in the island outside of us owning our own homes. And that worries me hugely. So I will always stand against that, as I have done over the past year with the votes that we've had in the Assembly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all your questions. I hope it's helped make up your minds. And thank you to Jane for passing around the microphone, to our broadcast partners, 3CI at the back there, staff of Parish of Trinity for lending us a hall, and of course to your candidates for all their questions and answers. If you would like to get in touch with the candidates, then you will find their contact details and manifestos on the vote.je website, and I'm sure you've got your pamphlets as well underneath your seats. In addition to your 3 deputies, you'll be able to choose 9 senatorial candidates and 1 Conatab. And if you applied for a postal vote, remember your ballot papers need to be received by the judicial gref by 12 noon on the Sunday the 7th. Don't forget, you can vote early. At the pre-poll station in St Paul's Centre in St Helier. That starts on the 26th of May and goes on till 1st of June. But of course, election day itself is Sunday the 7th. Polling stations are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you're voting in person, please make sure you bring photographic ID. And you can get any more information and see all those manifestos on vote.je. Thank you very much, everybody.